Bending is the most expressive way to communicate emotion on the guitar. Let me show you why, how, and when to bend. All right, bending notes is basically the art of taking any specific note and bending the string out of pitch or into pitch in this case here. What we're doing is on the top three strings, the high strings, we bend towards the center of the guitar. We bend up. And on the low three strings, we bend towards the middle of the guitar. Okay, so we bend those strings down. We're doing this to express emotion. So it's a very vocal-like sound. And 9 times out of 10, we're bending to a specific note. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. But a lot of times people say, you know, where am I bending to? Am I like, how do I know what notes to bend to and why am I doing this? Well, the why, of course, is it's expressive and we can play a note that we might normally otherwise just fret or hammer to or pull off to or slide to, but in this case we're bending the string. So if I were to say right here, play at the 8th fret, and I wanted to bend up to this note right here, I could slide to it, or I could bend up to it. You maybe even give it some vibrato. So the why is we're expressing ourselves, and when you can get your hands wrapped around this, get your mind wrapped around this, it becomes an incredible way to just fluidly express yourself. So that's the why. Now, when to do this? People ask me this all the time. Eric, when should I bend? Well, you bend when you want to because it's an expression of you, the artist. So obviously if a solo calls for it and you're trying to transcribe that solo and play it note for note like Eddie did or B.B. King or whoever, then you're going to bend where they bend. But as far as improvisation and expressing yourself, it's literally as versatile as what notes do you want to play. Okay, so there's times where you'll want to bend a note, another time where you might want to slide up to a note or pull off or hammer on, etc. Okay, so that's the when to do it. Now, the how to do it. This is where we have a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about the fingers. We're going to talk about how far you can bend and that sort of thing. So usually when we're bending, we're going to bend a quarter step, a half step, a whole step, 1.5 steps, even 3/4 steps, even 2 to 2.5 steps. Like I said, usually what you're doing when you're bending is you are bending up to a note that you normally would play. But with, say, like quarter step or 3/4 step bends, you can just give nuances, almost like a tip of the hat, if you will, to a specific note. And without committing to the whole note, you can just kind of suggest it. And I'll show you where we might want to do that. So a lot of times in blues, so what I was just playing there was like, a B.B. King style Thrill Is Gone type of thing in A minor. And so a lot of times, when we're bending, say like a quarter step. So a lot of times when we're going, say, from the minor third to resolve to the 1. So if we were, if this is our scale in A, that's our minor third. You don't have to know what that means. You might know that just by ear. You might know that theory-wise. If you don't, if your tonic's here, that's going to be a minor third, 3 steps up, or 3.5 steps up. So in that case there, when we're talking about blues, which we could use any genre, but blues is a great one to work with. A lot of times this is just bent up just a quarter of a step. So it's just a slight bit. And it's inferring in some ways that we're going to the major. But since it's a very minor sounding progression, it really doesn't, we don't want to go unless it were in, say, a major key. Like if I was playing, then that might sound real nice, but we're playing in a minor key. We don't really want to bend all the way up to the note. Now, that's more of the abnormal, or if you will, outside the norm of what we typically would do, okay? Same thing with a 3/4 bend. You're going to, at the end of the day, express yourself. So let your ear tell you where you should be bending to. That being said, there are times where you actually want to bend up to a note. So for instance, some classic blues licks where you're doing like a, in this case here, we're bending up a whole step and resolving on the same note. Now I could just play, but that's real boring, isn't it? It sounds much better to go. That's why we bend. We're back to the Y there. Or in this case here, if we were bending up to the A, we might bend a whole step. So we're bending to that specific note. You can bend more than that. You could bend, well, we just did a whole step. We did a half step a lot of times. This note right here, in blues, this is the 4 of the scale. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll bend into the blue note, right? What we call the flat 5, also known as the tritone. We might bend up to it and back down like for that true bluesy type of sound. So that's a half step bend. We got quarter steps, half steps, whole steps. Up here I did a 1.5 step bend. So I bent up to this note, which is a G, from the E. And another whole step bend there. So there's many different scale degrees that you can bend to beyond, say, like 2.5 steps, and I would probably only do that on the B string. You're gonna start getting into breaking a string territory, okay? Unless your guitar is tuned down a bit. Now, as far as the fingers to bend with, what's really cool is this little quarter step bend that we talked about, like, that we're doing, like, say, right here, is done with the first finger, and we're usually not bending more than just like that little. We could, I mean, there's nothing to say that we couldn't, but like best practices, if you were to take all the blues players from the beginning of time till now, we just don't do that sort of thing, okay? So usually the first finger is only bending about a quarter step for those little subtle nuances. The third and fourth finger, because of where they're at, are really the ones that are going to be bending into the half steps and the whole steps and the 1.5 steps and so on and so forth. Okay, so, and specifically the third finger, right, the ring finger, because of its length. The pinky, not so much. It can do it, but usually not so much. Also, you want to support the finger that's doing the bending. Now, of course, if you were doing this with the first finger, we don't have another finger back here to support it, so you're on your own. But let's say I'm bending right there. I'm bending this with my third finger, but I'm using my second finger to support that note, to help with the vibrato, to help with the bend. We're not going to talk about vibrato right now, but just I'm throwing it in there, right? Reason being is it really helps with the bend, because of course as you bend this you're getting resistance, and so that second finger is going to help a bit there. I've never seen, and I've never done it myself, bend a note like this just solo. Feels very naked. It doesn't feel like I can really bend it quite to pitch, and it feels like it's going to slip out from underneath my fingers. Okay, bending, like anything, it's going to take time. Nobody gets it right at first. 0 people. Hendrix didn't get it right at first. Eddie Van Halen didn't get it right at first. It took lots and lots of practice, so just understand that. You can bend more than one string at a time. In fact, with double stops, I did this right in the beginning here. A lot of times that's done on the B and G string. You can also do double stops like this, where we're holding the target note and we're bending another note up to the target note, and we get that nice kind of dissonant rock and roll sound. We need to have both of those notes sounding right together. Now, Again, it's going to be difficult for folks at first. It is for everybody. Here is a tip that's going to help a lot. Number one, make sure that you're not doing kind of like a classical version of playing. Make sure that your thumb is, if not over the top of the neck, that you've got a good grasp of the guitar neck. Now, some of you might say, well, that's going against what you teach in your programs, Eric. Well, no, in the beginning, I do teach you to drop that thumb because we're trying to play chords and that sort of thing. But when it comes to bending, you need support there. So grappling the neck is going to help you. If you don't have to do that, then don't, but trust me, that is going to help a lot. Also, you might want to try thinner strings. It seems that oftentimes guitar players think that thicker strings means something, means that they're going to be a better player, it's going to sound better, or their tone's going to be better, etc., etc. When guitarists have found that oftentimes thinner strings have more dynamic range, more clarity, and so try not to fall into that camp of that. Yes, Stevie Ray Vaughan used 12s and 13s at different points in his career, and thinner than that. Billy Gibbons uses 7s, okay? So I've never played 7s, but I've used 9s, I've used 10s, I've used 8s. And recently, just a few years ago, I took all my guitars and went down 1 gauge and made all the difference in the world. Made things a lot easier when I was bending and what have you, even though I've used 10s my whole life, going to 8s and 9s on some of my guitars made all the difference in the world. So make sure you do that. That will help a ton. My friends, I'm passionate about your success on the guitar. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I left anything out. Like, subscribe, have a lot of amazing things for you, including UGS Standard. Click that link below, friends. I'm here to help you. I'll see you in the next video.